Welcome to Project Chatter, the podcast where PPM experts from various sectors talk about the latest trends. Listen to Val and Dale as they talk about tried and tested best practices and share their unfiltered thoughts about the industry. Whether you're here to learn how to progress your career, improve your project control skills, or just want to hear an Aussie and South African rant about projects, then you've come to the right place. Welcome to the Project Chatter podcast with your hosts, Dale Fung and Val Matthews.
In this episode, we speak to Kevin O'Grady. Kevin is Director of Cognitive, helping organizations in the built environment deliver capital projects with certainty. He aligns commercial planning, technical detail, and modern systems tech to unlock value. His work spans due diligence, whole life costing, and digital innovation, from digital twins to reality capture, for clients including Philips Healthcare, Fraport and Birmingham Airport, Arup, Atkins Realis, and T. Clark.
Yeah, it was amazing to have Kevin on. Went all over the show because, not because he wanted to, but because his history, his experience, his CV, Val, is one of the most decorated we've had on this podcast, and we've had quite a few decorated CVs. He's got such a breadth and depth of knowledge, and he came on to share it with all of us here. And we sort of honed in. I know we could have gone all over the show, but you honed in on blockchain, which is one we haven't unpacked in a while, and carbon as well. But what are some of the things that stood out for you?
I think he had probably one of the best definitions of blockchain, and we talked about practical use cases in the construction environment where it's actually quite difficult. We talked about bravery, in the sense of adopting blockchain, but that it's not an unfeasible approach. And Kevin's kind of understanding and decomposition of that subject matter was quite useful. Also, how we kind of aspire to carbon and what kind of opportunities there are out there for us to link that as part of not just the kind of the cost schedule timeline, include that as part of the asset lifecycle or the product lifecycle of projects. I thought it was very, very interesting.
Yeah, I love the fact that he didn't speak about these topics in isolation. He linked how you could use blockchain with AI, with carbon, with cost and schedule, and with computer vision and with camera feeds, and it can all work together. But he also gave it sort of really tangible examples that people could see in their mind's eye. It wasn't sort of out there that, futurescaping. It was, this is what you can do right now, and it's quite practical. So we won't spoil too much of it, folks. We'll leave it there for you. As we say, keep listening, keep liking, and keep paying it forward.
Hello, project people. Welcome back to a brand new episode of the Project Chatter podcast. It's always good to have you with us, and good to see you, Dale. How are you, sir?
I'm good, thank you, Val. I'm frantically rushing home because of train delays and things just to make this recording. We have a very, very special guest on, so I don't want to miss this one. But how are you doing? How's it warming up on that side of the pond?
Mate, we're finally getting some sun. As you can see, I'm sitting in the perfect corner to watch the sun rise because it's the morning in Australia, but it's absolutely lovely. Melbourne's quite miserable most of the year if it doesn't get good sun. So we stopped raining last week, but I'm glad to be heading into summer. I miss Martin. Where is Martin, Dale?
Martin, he's stuck in Middle Earth, also known as the Midlands, I think you coined it.
Yes. Well, we miss you, Martin. But let's welcome our guest, Kevin O'Grady. It's great to have you with us. How are you, sir?
Yeah, cheers, Val. Yeah, no, good to be on. Good to be on to talk. And myself and Dale have been sort of talking about doing this podcast for a while. I think it's good to be here and good to share some of the bits that we're working on.
Awesome, mate. Now, we realize this is your first podcast, and usually with new guests, we like to hear a bit of the origin story, and we're just talking about it offline before we press record. And I dare say we probably go all places because you've got quite a breadth of experience, but how did it all start for you, Kevin? How did you get into this field?
Yeah, so I started on one of Margaret Thatcher's youth opportunity schemes and become an electrical engineer, working sort of way back looking at the electrical engineering side, but where you sort of move out into bigger projects where you're running labour and looking after the cost on there, it morphed more into the office and more doing work, running projects. And for that, looking after the commercial side, I went back to Reading University when my boys were quite young and studied surveying, and then went into quantity surveying, looking after projects from a commercial aspect. I think that sort of, it's funny when you start off, it's on engineering, and then you find out that some of your skill sets probably lean better towards different disciplines. And I've always quite liked the commercial aspect, because you're looking after from early feasibility to getting into contract right the way through to final accounting and closing it out. And I think the only bit I probably do miss of engineering is nice when you do a job, you can look back and see it, and it was a good job. With sort of commercial management, you don't look and say, wow, that was a good spreadsheet. That was what a great spreadsheet that was. It's not, you don't get that same sort of satisfaction of physically seeing a project through from start to finish, as in engineering wise. I think that's the only downside, but the positive side is you get to work on some really amazing projects in the commercial ones. I ended up working out in the Middle East, predominantly on airports. I worked at Heathrow Terminal 2 from the very beginning, setting up the contracts to the very end and final accounts. After Terminal 2, I went out to Abu Dhabi, to the midfield terminal, worked on that one for many years, then worked for Arup in an engineering firm, cost management in an engineering firm, which, again, fantastic, because if you've got any questions on engineering, it's only a phone call to the lift specialist or the groundwork specialist or the steel specialist or the MEP specialist to tell you about the bits that make up your estimate. So working alongside some of these great engineers was amazing. And then since 2020, because aviation certainly had a slowdown in COVID, I set up my own company, and we worked in healthcare and sort of aviation. And that's been the last sort of 5 years working for Cognitive, doing aviation projects, mainly on master planning. So very early master planning, setting up the projects and then getting them through development consent orders, or getting them into REBA 0 to REBA 1 or REBA 0 to REBA 3 or 4. So that's been quite interesting from my side.
Yeah, brilliant. I would love to just peel back a little bit more. Why spreadsheets? Why QSing? Why commercials? What was the fascination on your side from, as you said, going from an engineer to something a little bit less tactical, or more tactical, but less, less contributional, less visibility of what you will see in the end?
Yeah, I suppose, like yourself, when you've got that engineering background, when you're on a project and someone says, look, there must be an alternative way to do this, there must be a better way of doing it, or the costs are overrunning. If you've been there before, it's a good point to actually know that you could maybe apply some of your knowledge to help projects still come in on cost. And cost is super important. If you can't afford the projects, none of these jobs would get off in the first place. So maybe using some of that engineering skills, I think, sort of work through. I did have a skill set of trying to bring together different disciplines. So we worked closely with the schedule team, and we've always made sure on the projects that we did in Arup that we had the work WBS and CBS aligned. So trying to make sure that every activity in the schedule was the same in my cost plan, and vice versa, pulls people out of silos and helps them work together. And I think that's probably a key part, is that trying to get people to collaborate together. And that's not a skill you can teach people coming through the industry. You've either got that sort of collaborative way of working, or you haven't. It's the same with good project managers. You can't do a project manager without talking to people. And I think it's that sort of combination. I think that's what sort of got me into cost management, I think, primarily.
Yeah, brilliant. As you were talking, Kevin, the sun just rose. So for anyone watching this, you just see my face just illuminated. That's just me getting excited about when you said WBS, CBS. That's all that is. So that's excellent.
Dale's found out what our weather's like because he's got the wrong leaves on the track. Coming into autumn now, the trains are disrupted with a few leaves on the track.
Yeah, beautiful. We also talked about a few different technologies, Kevin. So what keeps you up at night in terms of technology? I mean, you've seen AI, there's blockchain, there's all sorts of things out there. What's tickled your fancy in this space? So
for about 8 years ago, I got involved with a group called FIBRI, which is like the Federation for International Blockchain. And that was at the early stages before most people sort of knew what it was and how it could be deployed. And I think that's, and the previous episode you had with Fred
Shibesta.
Fred Shibesta. Fred
Yep.
Shibesta, can never remember. It was really good on how blockchain can improve capital projects or project delivery. I thought that was really good. He was saying it's not a silver bullet. It needs to have a purpose. It needs to be driven. And I really liked the way he did it about it needs to be impactful and sort of shareable. And I think that to me is could go across nearly everything, couldn't it? It needs to be impactful if you're looking at new technology, and it needs to be something that's open protocol and really easy, friendly to use. And I think that was really good. So I've been on the board of Fabri for about 8 years. 8 years we're working on that one, and they just recently had a conference out in Brazil that was really good. And they release every year sort of like the state of blockchain. And I think it's quite, when you go through the data and analyze the data, it's every year on year, it's a 13% increase in blockchain products. So although people think, it's Bitcoin or it's not needed, there is applications for blockchain. I think that was quite interesting. We do our own sort of version of digital twin. So we use a platform. It started off in healthcare, where we were doing healthcare project delivery and QSing. The reporting was quite static. We're talking about, they've broken through to the new room. The MRI is going to come in and different components. Very hard to visualize. So we started using sort of like a GoPro, linking it through on a platform that you could walk through the project like a Google Maps, and it brings the data alive. So on our progress reports, and our progress meetings, we can go, this socket, and you can open up and walk the client through. This is a socket. Is that the wrong location? Yeah, that location is wrong. And then the platform developed into one where you can bring in the Revit model. So now you can overlay where the wall should be with where you've built them, and you can do real life sort of contrast to, and even overlay different timelines of the actual programs. You can look at what was it like last month, what's it like this month, and what does that BIM overlay look like. So that was really good. We started on a few projects just as a trial, and now the company that we work for, it's mandated on all UK and Ireland projects that these reality captures are taken and they're used as part of the project delivery. So I was quite pleased that something we trialed with our own funding, to be fair, with our own funding to see if it would improve our own workflow, that it's now adopted on a major hospital programs across UK and Ireland. So that's something. I think digital twin has its place. I don't think it's going to solve all the problems, but I think where you can use it in a collaborative way, and again, back to that, it's got to be impactful and it's got to be shareable. So we actually run our progress meetings where you actually dial in and walk the site and walk the progress with the client. Some of these clients even have never been to site and never seen the site that we're working on. The challenges you have, nothing better than opening up a video and walking through it and seeing, the state of the ceiling above and where the problems are. So that was also quite good. And we've also just come off a major aviation project where we've looked at using a SaaS platform. And I know on previous one, Dales, you've had that is SaaS dead with AI? And I quite like that. That was another good episode. I encourage people to go back and watch that one. With AI, are people who are bringing out SaaS platforms really worried about what's coming through? But again, I think we use this SaaS platform so that the client himself ordered the SaaS platform. So we weren't selling him anything. We were saying, look, if you like it, you buy the license and we'll work in your platform. We'll build your data and we'll put your costs and we'll put all your time, all the drawings will get uplifted into it. And when we're gone, you can keep enriching that data and keep working on that data. It's not our benefit. We can do an Excel output, but for our own, we can take that away as our end of the job. We can do an Excel output from this SaaS platform, but predominantly, if you've got a line item in there that says sprinkler, you can open up the sprinkler drawing that pulled the quantities from the model within that platform. So if you're looking about sort of shareable and impactful, say your estimator disappeared or someone's got moved off the job or a new consultant got brought in, everyone can see where the sprinkler drawing was that got the quantities in that SaaS platform. And I think that's hugely impactful. It's moving away from static 2D Excel to a more three-dimensional, and the links directly to the model back into that. And that was huge. I mean, that wasn't a small project. That was over €1 billion project with over 200 disciplines in there, from wayfinding to baggage to structural to architectural, trying to keep pace of 200 sub-disciplines, designing disciplines, picking up their drawings, picking up the changes in the drawings, and then highlighting them in an estimate. I think that's, again, we're pretty proud as a team to have pulled that off in such a short space of time, which I don't think I could have done if we were just working in opening up drawings and marking the drawing and then moving that to Excel. I don't think we could have done that in the same speed or transparency, I think. So that was another sort of using data. And I think because it's on a SaaS platform, probably going back to more what Dale's world is, that because you're entering the information straight into a SaaS platform, it goes directly into a database. So then that opens up a whole world of what you can do with AI on the analytics side of it. Because normally if you had an Excel spreadsheet and you wanted to do Power BI, you have to move it into a machine readable format to get the data out. But because you're put into a SaaS platform that is already a database, the translation to machine readable is already done. You don't have to have that compass point between human legible to machine readable. You've bypassed that by putting it into a machine readable database format to start with. You're cutting out. Maybe it looks from a first phase slower because you're putting it into a database. It may be slightly slower than Excel, maybe not as versatile of formulas and doing different lookup formulas and stuff between sheets. But I think long term, there's far more benefits from starting in a database, which I'm sure, Dale, you've probably got more experiences from that side and the analytics once it's in that format.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Kevin. I want to step back a few bits because I realize we're going down the rabbit hole, and as we go down the rabbit hole, we may lose some audience members. But we haven't had a blockchain discussion in a while. Okay. What's your kind of giveaway definition for the layman on blockchain who would be thinking about what is Kevin talking about on this podcast?
No, so for blockchain, I've always, from the very beginning, I've always said it's an Excel spreadsheet with a padlock. So that's how I explain it to people, which is slightly a bit different. It's because if you break it down, blockchain is, or if you call it sort of like a database or a padlock. So it's a ledger, a distributed ledger. So it's an Excel spreadsheet you can share, but it's a ledger because an Excel spreadsheet is a ledger. And distributed means anyone can go into it, but you can only change the future reference in it. You can't change history because it's got that encrypted code into it. So imagine you had an Excel spreadsheet where you can't go back and rewrite a line. You can only write a correction line in it. So say you did a false entry, you can't go back and change that line because it's padlocked. You can only enter a new line in with the data. So I see it as just a ledger that's got a padlock. So you've got one version of the truth and it's immutable. You can't change history. History is history because it's locked. And I think that sometimes helps people to understand the way the blocks are made up within a blockchain.
Yeah,
once they're sort of etched.
I'd imagine with that, finance would hate that. Dale, what do you think?
Finance project managers would probably hate it. Go change the PowerPoint presentation before we go in the meeting. Go change the Excel table. That number's wrong.
Yes,
I think, Kevin, that's probably the best explanation I've heard of what blockchain is, and I'm sure the listeners will appreciate that. As Val mentioned, do
you know what the first one was?
Go ahead.
Well, the first part would be Moses and his tablet and his ledger.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Because it was immutable. He put down the first ledger that once it's carved in stone, you couldn't really change it.
Yeah, hieroglyphics.
So that could have been the first one.
Yeah,
hieroglyphics. Yeah, that's once it's written, that's it. Once it's carved into that stone, and that's similar. To go back, you'd have to try and raise the whole wall, so then it's It's immutable in the fact that the data is locked for prosperity. I think that's a key one.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. The one challenge we've had, though, with blockchain on this podcast is even Fred Shabesta that came on, you mentioned Fred, he was fantastic coming on. I mean, Val, I think he's made his millions and billions, gazillions in Oz off of, not just blockchain, but, technologies and finance, etc. I think even he struggled a bit back then to find a specific use case or a strong use case in projects and project delivery for blockchain. We've had others on talking about blockchain, but I think the closest we've come is potentially, self-executing contracts using blockchain.
Yes.
And I haven't seen it used in practice, but there's this part of me that goes, well, actually, if we set it up correctly, and there's transparency, which we know there is in blockchain, and we know certain events will go ahead and trigger payments, then surely there's a use case for blockchain that you've either thought of, come across, or perhaps even are using or seen being used in real life that you can perhaps share with those listeners that are listening.
So the one construction related that I've thought of, but has never been transacted, but I think it would help immensely, is there's a lot of fair payment charters and the right for people to pay people on time and to get money flowing in a contract. I mean, we've set up projects that the contractor is the bank. I don't know why we've done that, but that's just the way we've set up construction projects, that the contractor is the bank for the project. He takes on board the payments, the client pays him. He then decides about how the payment flows down, and the client may not be aware of where the flow of payments go. And because blockchain is transparency, trust, and openness, if you had a blockchain that everybody has a project wallet, so every subcontractor and every contractor has a project wallet, and the contractor, the client, pays 10% at the very beginning of the job to the contractor. In that project wallet and that overview of the project, you can see that 10% dividing into the sub-wallets. It's all visible, it's all transparent. The time of when it was released and when it was accepted is all recorded in time. And that's on a blockchain. You can't falsify that. As soon as somebody says, yeah, I've got the money, it's in my bank, that is the timestamp on the code, in the blockchain code, saying that money has transferred. The client then knows, like some of the previous ones, you won't name some of the contractors, but some of the ones where contractors, when they get into financial difficulty, will use project money from one project to pay another, Peter to pay Paul. And if there's that transparency from the client, I've given you my money, I want that money to go to my subcontractors. In fact, they're my partners, really. If you look at it as a partnership, these are all partners in getting your project delivered. They're just smaller parts of the wheel. If you could set up a project wallet, and I think there is one. There was one in India that when we went down to Mishkonda Ray, they did the very first blockchain contract with Smart Streets. They were looking at the one in India where they actually have on construction projects, project wallets where money is fully visible throughout the construction industry to where the payments are. Now, I know if we brought that out tomorrow, not many contractors would like that, because obviously this is what we've set up for hundreds of years of how the contractor gets all his money. So you would have to incentivize the contractor to adopt that blockchain project wallet system. So you'd have to pay maybe the contractor a higher prelims in order to be visible about where the flow of money goes throughout. And he can still stop the money. He still doesn't have to pay the token to the contractor, because he can say for poor performance, but the client would then say, well, hang on, I've given you the money for the contractor. You can still stop it, but why did you apply for it if you've stopped it downstream? What was that all about? And then that could be sorted out. But the token, that eventually you could move to a tokenized system that if you pay a main contractor, the token would say to the bearer of the bank, which is to Bob and Son Joinery. So no one can cash that money. That money couldn't go anywhere. It can only get cashed. The token can only be cashed by the subcontractor or subconsultant direct to the client. So the client would then know that that token has been cashed and he's been paid. So there's no reason why it couldn't be done. There's many reasons why people don't want it to be done. But if it took a very brave government entity to say, do you know what, on a government project, I'm going to trial tokenized payments and I'm going to pay the contractor more for doing a tokenized payment. It's a very ethical, open and transparent and honest way of running projects. But you're taking out the way that we've run projects for hundreds of years. And it would, if you did it overnight, hundreds of construction companies would go bust overnight because they're working on this, having money in their bank, and using that is how they make the interest on payments being delayed throughout. That's how they, if we're honest, that's the way of the world, because we've made it that way over hundreds of years. But it has the ability to change, but it's bigger than 3 people on a podcast to do that. You'd need a very proactive and brave government to do government projects to start that as a potential of being a way of payment. But that's what I've thought about how it would be help construction. But we see it on this company used for tracking carbon emissions and carbon. Back to the carbon bit. So probably right, Val. It goes round in circles. But I know at the moment they are using blockchain to help track carbon emissions and track carbon values that people state. If you state this is what I'm going to be, my emissions are, it's a good way of tracking because it gives that sort of management into and also back to the sort of UN SDG goals and tracking them way through. So it could be used for good on construction sites and for environmental, but most of it we see is in real estate for smart contracts, and anything that could speed up a transaction of buying and selling property would be amazing, wouldn't it?
Yes, especially here in the UK, it's not easy. I know what it's like in Val, but we'll come to you in a second. Just commenting and reflecting on what you've said there, Kevin. It's quite interesting because we're saying the technology exists. There's a potential framework or theory that we can test. Amongst us, we know people in government, so maybe we can identify a small project and set it up for them, and maybe they want to test it. I just wonder, though, if we had a simulator, what that would do to things like cash flow for businesses, for example, because we know one of the reasons people hold on to payments is because of cash flow, which is a key blood life source, if you will, for businesses. So I think there's probably wider implications, but it'd be good to test it out and see what the symptoms are. But Val, let's bring you into this because I know when we previously discussed this, you had some thoughts and ideas. What do you think?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, you're quite right, Kevin. It would take a very brave government to basically open the books for public inquiry, especially around mega projects where you are using public money, taxpayer funded money for projects. And it would be a very cool thing to see the distribution of wealth. But in terms of aspirations, there is a company it's actually the Port of Rotterdam, and they've got a very big aspiration for it's a sizable port, but it's not a very big port. They want to be the smartest port in the world. I don't know if you've read this, Kevin. They've got a really slick aspiration. One part of it obviously is around smart contracts and integrating the supply chain. To make sure logistics, and they've got digital twin, etc. But I thought that was very, very interesting for a port to adopt something like that. Again, being brave and looking at how they at least prove the test case for if a port could use blockchain. And it makes sense because it's transactional logistics from various different suppliers. Then they have downstream suppliers because they, freight, etc. So I thought that was a very, very interesting piece. And they had some really cool benefits that they linked there that would be the same we would have on projects: increased efficiency, reduced cost, enhanced transparency, improved sustainability, greater security. And you look at the projects, we almost have the same kind of success criteria as we set up a project. We want to be on budget, we want to be on time, we want to be on cost. If we were to kick it off, could we run blockchain as a simulation, as a scenario, as a use case in a digital world to show and share with governments? You mentioned you're part of this global blockchain group. Have you guys done anything interesting in that space or white papers around it for the purpose of others using?
Yeah, we because there's a consultancy arm Fabry. There's the trying to highlight the changes within regions, because it is truly global. It's got members worldwide in Fabry, and they say the recent one they had was in Brazil. With South America, seems huge increase in people trying to get involved in it, which is good to see. But it's London and New York and Dubai, I think, are the leading ones in blockchain currently as cities, as main cities. But I think we could definitely do a small, I'd say do it small, for a small, maybe 4 or 5 contractors, and actually pay the contractor more to do, first off, just project wallets. So money is moving between the small projects, 4 or 5 people on a small project, and then eventually move to a tokenized project. So there's no money moving forward. It's a token that the contractor receives, which he cashes in at the bank of the client. So I think the first one is like all baby steps, isn't it? Baby steps. Is it impactful? Did it make a difference? Is it transparent? Did it help payments? And does the government know where his money goes to? In so many places, people worry about money laundering, and construction is particularly a place that they talk about as being an area where people can move money internationally between projects. I would thought a port would be ideal. You've got multiple stakeholders. You need trust and transparency, which ticks the box in both of those two. And a small project where you put the AI analytics. Well, how quick would you get paid normally? Did this ensure that the client then sees that the contractor hasn't been paid, yet he's paid the main contractor? And this is, I think you can see straight away where the resistance may come from when people start seeing, why does that? And you're dead right, Val. It's cash flow is key for small SMEs. Cash flow is 100% the bloodline, and by major contractors maybe stopping the flow of that lifeline is why we see so many small companies, for no fault of their own, fantastic companies, go into the wall because of a simple thing. And the client wants the company to be paid. Everybody wants the company to be paid. It's just unfortunate we don't have that transparency way of showing that your money is going to the places where it's meant to do and flow down through the system. But yeah, I think a small trial would be amazing.
If we link back, and I just want to explore this a bit, we'll come back to carbon as well, because I think it's linked, as you said. Progress, how would you connect progress to the blockchain? Is there a way we talk about cash flow and logistics and supply, but obviously the challenge we have is usually when either clients or contractors hold payment. One, yes, it's cash flow. 2, they'll argue progress. These two are interlinked in some way. Is there a way to tokenize progress against the blockchain for release of funds, or have you seen anything in that space?
There's not in the way of. I've got a very good contact who trials all the different GeoSlam and all the reality capture ones. He's absolutely brilliant. I'm not an expert in it, but he's definitely an expert in it, and he might be a good guy to have on the podcast, because he's fantastic. And he gets given cameras to trial. That's how good he is. He gets cameras given to trial and test different platforms. But there's an AI tool that sits in some of these that can recognize progress and change since the last scan was done. So if you could link that AI from a reality capture, that this room hasn't been completed, it's not finished, so therefore that progress would go into an AI tool, and that AI tool would then link to, did the guy do exactly what he said he did? Is the steel on site? Is the steel up in the ceiling and installed? It's either a yes or a no. If it can recognize them and you can do a validation, AI will get clever and clever about learning. If this is the model that you've drawn in Revit, and it knows what the final solution should be, as those items go in and AI is picking it up as you're walking around, it will do an automatic valuation. It won't be perfect because you can't measure commissioning, and you can't measure testing, and you can't measure validations, and you can't measure paint, I don't think, on a wall. But there is many things that it can do. The big bits of steel going in, walls going up, flooring going in, no reason why you couldn't link a reality capture AI output to a blockchain model to say about payments, and then that could be a release of a release of funds. But I think if you talk about automatic release of funds, it would probably scare people to think the funds would go out automatically. But you wouldn't then have monthly valuations, would you? Once the deal's up and in, there's no reason why that valuation couldn't come through in an automated way. SAP worked with us on one. So we worked with SAP on a HS2 trial with Arup way back in 2019, 2020. Well, it must be 2018, 2019. We worked on one for HS2. If we had a smart contract, can we track a product from leaving the manufacturer's gate? And we work with Tata Steel, HS2, SAP, and Arup, looking at, can we track this all the way through validation, sign off from the architect, because that's the bit Arup was really interested in. If you send something to site that hasn't been approved, why would it be accepted at the gates? It needed that validation all the way through the design acceptance, the factory acceptance, the site acceptance that it hadn't been damaged in transit and it's the right piece, to when it was installed. We tracked that right the way through with SAP as a proof of concept back then. And we thought this would be amazing. Of course, SAP with HANA can do a lot of those AI tools now. And it was the forerunner. I think it was a post on that one that we did on the outputs of that HS2 trial that we did. And most of it was done with as business development. There's no real funds in it. It was more to see how does, and it takes sort of, HS2's been the forerunner for many innovations. I think they've done a lot in the way of innovation and helping UK efficiencies. Arup was also very forefront in thinking about the way they were thinking about how do we get design sign-off and proof of products going in. Very much back to the Grenfell and the golden thread, because if the wrong piece of lagging goes on site and gets installed, who's doing that validation once all the cladding's on? How do you see that the fire stopping's in and the right bit was put in? So we did the right the way through to when it was on site and installed, and we did that blockchain verification with SAP, and it was a really interesting project and quite easy in effect to implement. It's easier than I thought.
So
to implement.
why didn't they implement it across HS2 then, Kev?
Well, this is the strange thing. When you look at even some of the simplest innovations, and that, even that thing we're talking about, project wallets, it's straightforward. I can't see why. I can't see the negative side of having a project wallet and people seeing where the money's going. I couldn't see a negative side, obviously, apart from people wanting to hold on to money. But it is surprising. It takes, I think, a brave companies and brave individuals to do that.
Well, I guess the trick is probably if you aren't being straight with where the money is going, then you don't want to use it, which is interesting within itself. I'm not accusing anyone of doing anything, but there's definitely that element of going, well, if everyone can see what I'm doing with the money, then I have fewer options in terms of what I can do with it. And there's that control element, I think, that people might be fearful of losing control, perhaps, of what they can.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think also maybe it's partly driven from government setting government projects with very small profit margins for contractors, and it's become an ever decreasing circle. So the contractor has to make money in order to make the job. If working on 2 and 3% is not sustainable for the construction industry, and it will fall over, because no bank will lend money to a construction firm if he says, what, you're making 2 to 3% profit? I'd rather work in another industry where people are making money. So they don't invest. So the banks don't support contractors. So the way they make money is they get a shed load of money every time there's a valuation, and that money sits in their bank, and then that money gets passed on to the teams that they determine are owed the money. Wow. And it's that percentage is a big percentage. When you're talking £1 million projects, there's a lot of money that sits in month on month. Maybe you get paid 30 days, they get paid 45 or 60 days. Over a year on big projects, big national capital projects, that's your 2 to 3% that makes your percentage as a contractor 4 or 5% or 6% profit in a year. But if we gave a contractor 6% or 7% profit margin and said to them, just be transparent where the money's going, I think you'd probably find that their projects would be more equitable, less companies would go bust, and it'd be more people invited into the industry because it's more equitable and more transparent. I think that it would take an absolute mind shift to go that way. But I think the governments, from back to your point, Val, I think the governments or someone like a port authority that's very innovative would definitely be the litmus test in it, and using your AI technology or promoting how that project went would be then open for others to get in and do the same.
I just wonder also if it hinders perhaps innovation and resourcefulness and entrepreneurship as well, in a sense, that spirit where maybe perhaps people don't want to be unlawful with what they're doing with the money, but they want to be creative with the little bit of money they have. And if there's blockchain, which is quite transparent and set in terms of, if I get this and this is what goes out, there's very little creativity I can use to change that margin. As you say, there's very slim pickings these days in construction, or it's been like that for a while, actually. And so if you wanted to get creative with how you use your money, blockchain stifles that, perhaps. And maybe that's one of the reasons, people don't want to adopt it. And I know there's sort of different securities you can put in place in terms of who sees, transactions and the like. But I guess it's similar to, if everyone could see what's in my bank account, would I want that, and where I'm spending my money?
Yeah,
it's one of those.
On the trial that we set out, because we were going to do it with one of the major airports, but it just before COVID, and it was all set up. We were going to get the order to do these project wallets, and the way that it's shown is as a percentage. So every contractor could see that 10%. They don't know what the value is, but 10% of the total has reached the main contractor. So they know the main contractor's got your part of your money in it. And then across all the sub-suppliers, percentages, now it could be out of that 10% the contractor gets paid, could completely pay 100% of one of the contractors completely. So he would be 100%. So his works could be early enabling works. So out of that first payment, the contractor gets 10%, but the sub-consultant gets, or the subcontractor gets 100% of the payment. Doesn't tell you how much. But everyone can see he's been paid 100%. He must have finished his job with all liabilities and everything cleared off. He could get 90% apart from retention. But everyone would transparently see that contractor's done and he's been paid. You don't need to know how much. You just want to know, is that contractor halfway through his drawdown, or is he 45%? The client can also see, I've walked out on site, there's no progress, yet all my contractors are sort of 80% paid. This is a worrying for a client. You could see that straight away walking out on site, wouldn't you? You'd see, well, hang on, I think we're ahead of payments. Or you would say, why is nothing getting done? Oh, I can see the contractor's only been paid 10%. We're 2 weeks from opening. It would be obvious. It would be painfully obvious. And I think maybe that's, for a client side, it would be an eye opener to them. But I think going to tokenized payment, where the contractor has no money, he just has tokens to pass out, might be a step too far for most because they're not dealing with funds coming in and out. But there's no reason why, if you set up a project today and you set it up with decent profit margins, there's no reason why you couldn't pay tokens to the end user. There's no reason why you couldn't.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's so many use cases, and I want to make a bit of time because we're running out a bit of time to talk a bit about carbon. You mentioned carbon and how that links to blockchain. I love the fact that you put forward a use case with AI and blockchain as well, as how it could work together. As you're talking about payments, I was thinking, if you got paid on earned value, and AI can see the earned value, and that triggered payments on blockchain. But the carbon one is interesting as well. And I know you've been doing the circuit, so to speak, if I can say, here in the UK, talking about carbon and cost in the cloud. What's sort of is it an outdated topic now, carbon, or is it something that's plateaued on the downward trend? Where are we with carbon?
Yeah, I definitely think it was definitely a buzzword, wasn't it? Carbon and measuring carbon. We thought it was going to come in. We thought the selling products into Europe now, we have to declare the carbon factor of those products into Europe. To sell into Europe, you have to declare it's the CBAM, isn't it? The cross-border carbon measurement or something tool that goes across. But I thought it was going to be a lot more prevalent. We were going to be measuring carbon a lot more higher. We've seen major organizations be done for greenwashing. And these are major organizations done for greenwashing. So it hasn't gone away, still there. We're quite lucky. We work a lot in aviation. And in aviation, they do have a lot of carbon targets they have to hit. It's not a nice to have. They have to hit them. So the way that when we build up master plans and cost master plans, not maybe at the master plan stage, because you don't know what equipment you're going to buy, but what we like to do set up for clients is in this SaaS platform, along the line, say you've got a line that says boiler, you can build up a full dim sheet of labor plant materials below that line within the estimate. It's all clearly transparent about how you've built up your estimate. So back to the old QSing of dim sheets and building them up from first principles, you've got the ability to do that. But if you think of boilers, just one start, that code for a boiler is just the start, and data can be attributed to that code. So now you can put cost, time, plant, labor, material. So that will drive out your schedule because you've put it to an activity, and that brings you on to your sort of question about carbon. Now that you know, maybe not at master planning stage, but you've given somebody a platform to capture A1 data for the product data, and then B1, then C1 and D1. As you go through and you know the data as your project goes through and you've picked the product, you will get the EPD data from the product and you can enter it against that line. The environmental product declaration sheet should give you the carbon factor, and there's many tools on the market that can give you carbon factors even at an early stage for paint and for plasterboard and items. But it's maybe not at the first stage, but certainly as you go through the project, as you start defining the design, so long as you've got a pigeonhole, I'm back to the QSing and spreadsheet side of it. So long as you've got a pigeonhole from which to put data, you're halfway there. I've got my information is structured, and I've got structured information against the code. I've now got the cost. I've got the time. Carbon is just another bean that we have to count, isn't it, for a QS? It's just another bean that we have to count. And people always say that QSing is going to be, AI is going to take over. You won't have that job. It'll automatically price everything. But I think what they're asking the sort of cost community is far reaching. It's not just cost. It's now carbon. It's now quality. It's now cost. It's now, so our role of measuring things is going to increase, isn't it? Measuring the journeys from the quarry to the site for topsoil or bringing aggregate in. You have to know how many vehicles, what type of vehicle, is it electric vehicle, non-electric vehicle, to do carbon properly. It's actually, we're going back in time where we have to do proper dim sheets and proper calculations. Otherwise, we'll all be done for greenwashing. It's okay at master plan to say this is the approximate carbon, but as you go through and start working it through, and to be honest, if you shortcut it, you're only cheating yourself out of how long-term you can improve carbon. If you've got the full measurement for carbon, the trip to site and the different manufacturers that you've used, if you don't measure it, how can you improve it when you go to replace that component? You can't, because you don't know what the carbon was in the first place. So how do I improve it? Because I haven't got a benchmark. And I think that's the key part. If we do enter the data, we've got the information such to improve on it. We did a very good project for a major airport, and they asked me to look at the screener machines that were going into the project, and they wanted a full sustainability analysis done, not just cost. So we were looking at the full Chrome analogy and lifecycle costing. So it was the cost of the unit and the maintenance and the cycle and how much they cost for licensing. The renewal cost, so how much in 5 years' time, if I had to get rid of it, would it cost to get it renewed, and the major components renewed. So does your product last 5 years, 8 years, 10 years? Because that will have a factor on the life cycle. The operational cost, the energy usage, the maintenance, and then the end of life. The end of life was quite interesting because it looked at disposal costs and for these major big machines, these massive 1-ton machines are over £1 million each. they have to be, because they've got radiation in them, they have to be, environmentally disposed of and tucked away. So the results from 4 major companies was massive. The difference was huge on environmental. Upfront cost, the cheapest was probably the worst environmentally, but it's surprising until clients are informed clients that ask the right questions. What is the full impact over the life cycle? And include carbon in that. What's my carbon impact? How can they really make informed decisions? So that, and it was only lucky that we worked with a very informed airport client that didn't want to buy cheap. He wanted to buy the best product over, because he's going to have that machine in his basement churning through screening bags for about 10 years. What's the best one for me to buy? And I thought that was amazing, and lucky that we work with informed clients, and that's just luck, I think, more than anything else.
Yeah, it's interesting in the aviation space. So we do a bit of work with them as well, and they float around the idea of SAF, and effectively, it hasn't really picked up here in Australia, but there's still a curiosity around not just carbon locking, which, as you said, you got to be careful with greenwashing. It sounds very insidious and intentful, but sometimes it's just because the client's not informed or they don't know the options, and they're trying to find ways to hit that KPI. Sustainable aviation fuel, or SAF. What's your view on that? What's it like in the UK? Is it being taken seriously? How are they approaching that?
No, I definitely think so. Sometimes you can pay for SAFs on your ticket, can't you? Up front, it tells you, do you want to pay extra for the SAFs, which goes towards it. In the pipelines to the aircraft, you can't mix that with aviation fuel. So most SAFs are delivered by Bowser. Bowser's a truck which transports it by truck then to your plane. It's not done through pipelines and it's different. SAFs are done through different way. If you're doing rapeseed, then there's your crop security, and you're trying to get that for feeding plates and stuff. You're now fueling aircrafts and stuff like that. I think there's a lot of development needed in it. I think it's good that they're looking at it, because if you don't look at it, you'll never improve it. And hydrogen's been looked at in aircraft, and I think there's a lot to it. There's a lot to SAFs. But I think if we look at it from a more selfish perspective, as individuals living in towns next to airports, if the SAF is less pollutant, then surely that's something we definitely need to look at. It's not just it's more environmental. It's more a lot of the kids now in a city are grown up with bronchitis and breathing problems and pollution problems. People always push back on EVs. Electric vehicles, but you wouldn't switch from an EV to a petrol car if we'd always been using EVs. No one would switch to a petrol car because they know that the pollution, you wouldn't swap to something that's not as green in pollution in cities. So I think there's a lot to it. I think in just demographics and helping with pollution is a good thing if they can help solve that one. But I think we have to do something. There's a lot of infrastructure issues with doing SAFs at airports and putting it through and mixing it through. You have pipelines across the country that will pipe aviation fuel to airports, and they have huge tanks at the airport that have 3-month or 3-week reserves in fuel, that if the pipeline doesn't come through, they've got 3 weeks worth of fuel at an airport, and some have more resilience, less resilience. If you're going to SAFs, it's probably trucked in, not from the same pipeline. So you've got a lot of trucks then moving around the country, to bring SAFs to the airport. There's a lot in it. I think it's more than just swapping it out and using a different fuel, like not filling it with petrol, you can use diesel. And I think I'm glad that they are looking at them. Because unless you start from the early, through the beginning, do you come across maybe and I think with AI looking at different alternatives, I think that could look at how we could trial different systems and different ways of growing. I don't even insects. They use insects, don't they? Which insects has an oil, and the insects grow at a phenomenal rate, and then they can get oil out of these small grubs that grow, and then they get the oil from that and compress that into oil. But again, I think there's unless you trial it, we'll never advance, I suppose. So I think I think it's good, but it's not taken up in many places, is it? We don't see many places taken up. I don't think because we are reducing the areas that we can grow arable crops, whilst with problems in places like Ukraine, we're not getting the same areas of land to grow crops. It only takes a bad winter, a bad summer, and it's really impacting. Most places like Dubai are populations growing, but they don't grow their own food, so they're relying on imported food. We saw that the royal family in Saudi Arabia brought land in Sudan as ring fencing areas where they can grow crops which for the future, they're not growing crops there today, but they've brought land outside of their own country to make sure they've got food security for their people. So growing crops for aviation fuel, you would say it may not be the best use of our resources that we've got. I'd say that currently, I think, that's what,
and they're hamstring as well, a bit like everybody else, where their funding is fundamentally reliant on either government or airlines, so that they've got to find a way to fund some of the R&D too. And that's sometimes the challenge with carbon in general, is it's going to take a lot of testing and trialing, and the government isn't handing out checks for R&D, and a lot of that 80-90% is probably failure, in the first stage. You don't even get it to kind of proof of concept stage. So there is a bit of a challenge to do it at scale, but you're right. Most countries, even in Australia, we have a lot of carbon targets. Now we are way off where we should be, and progress is very, very slow. But look, we could still do a lot more if we have a lot more people involved in the R&D and the innovation side of things. And AI should help, as you said. Yeah.
What I've sent, if you could put different scenarios through AI, what if I used this seed, or what if I tried mixing different types of oils together? It was quite funny when I realized about electric vehicles moving people across. I didn't realize some of the logistics in that, because if you've got enough battery capacity to take you from A to B, if you can't land at B because of fog, you have to have enough fuel on board to land at the next nearest. So now you don't just need enough power and battery power to go A to B. You need to go A to B, but then maybe C or D. So you have to carry quite a lot of extra power just to go from short distances, in case when you go to the next one through fog or something you can't land, or through aviation or through hold-ups you get stalled. You have to have a lot more fuel than you need to go A to B. So that's something, again, that people don't always appreciate. If it's the distance, you have to have a lot more than you need. And I'm glad, because if you're on a plane, I want to make sure he's got enough fuel to take me to the next airport if I can't land. So that's good.
Yeah, there's so much, and I wish we had a few more hours to talk to you, Kevin, because I think there's so much you've unpacked, from a blockchain through to a carbon perspective. We've spoken about these topics before, but you've brought such a fresh perspective to where they are now in the industry and the use cases, and I'm sure the listeners will get plenty out of this one. I mean, just reflecting on what you're saying there, a few comments, I guess, before we head towards the end, is one, there's probably a few big companies that are maybe hindering alternative technologies in energy, shall we say. But then also on the blockchain front, it's very interesting, because that's not so much, I think, a lack of technology being available. That's more sort of humans wanting to adopt something that actually is completely different to how we've always done it. And there's a lot to ponder. There's a lot to experiment on both topics. And an hour is not enough to cover them both. But look, we'd love to have you back to explore some of these or any other topics as well. It's been an absolute blast to have you on. It's been a long time coming, as you're saying there. But look, before we let you go, Kevin, was there any final thoughts that you want to leave our listeners with?
I like your closing one that you have down. What's it? Stay interested. What's your final closing one that you have? I think that's fantastic. You always have that same sign off. What's that one you say? Stay interested.
I'll leave it till the end, just so we'll leave a little cliffhanger there.
Yeah, I do like that, and I think you're dead right. That is it, and enjoy it. Enjoy the industry you're in. If you're not enjoying it, maybe you shouldn't be in that industry, because there's lots to still unpack. You can never get tired of it, because there's so much innovation coming out so fast that things change like so quickly. So it's very interesting times. And thanks for having me on.
No, it's
only podcasts like this that people get to actually discuss, and if people come and contradict what I say, that's good, because it sparked a conversation.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
We want the discourse and the debate, don't we, Val?
Exactly, mate. No, it's great to have you on board, Grevin. And yeah, keep doing what you're doing, mate. We need more people out there pushing the envelope.
Yeah,
Perfect.
absolutely. So there we have it, folks. It's the end of another episode of the Project Chatter podcast. If you like what you've heard, please do help us pay it forward and share a link to this episode on your favorite social media. Once again, a massive thank you to our guest, Kevin O'Grady, and thank you all for listening. Till next time, we say stay safe, be disruptive, and have fun doing it. There you go, Kev. From Val and me.
Perfect.
From Val and me, it's
Very
bye
good.
for now. Take care. Bye all.